Jealousy doesn't wait until you win, it shows up the moment your power position changes. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. Most people think jealousy is about success, money, attention, what you've accomplished, but jealousy actually responds to authority. It activates when people realize you're no longer playing the same role, when they sense you're not circling the same destination anymore. And here's the truth most people get wrong. Jealousy isn't loud at first. It doesn't announce itself with hate. It shows up as doubt, as concern, as someone questioning your decisions before you even proven them. So if you felt weird energy before results, before validation, before evidence, you're not imagining it. They weren't reacting to what you've done. They were reacting to where your power was headed. Growth doesn't always look impressive in the beginning. It looks uncertain, unfinished, unfamiliar. And when you step outside what's familiar, you don't just grow, you disrupt positioning. Not because you're wrong, but because you're brave enough to move without guarantees. Jealousy is not about your achievements, it's about perceived trajectory. It's the moment someone realizes she's not just dreaming, she's moving. But here's the deeper truth. Jealousy is a reaction to lost psychological positioning. Think of it like a map they had of you in their mind. They knew where you stood. They knew what category you fit into. They knew how your path compared to theirs. And then you moved off the map. Now they can't place you where they used to. And that disorientation, that is what triggers the reaction. Because when someone can't locate you anymore, they lose their reference point. Your movement forces comparison, not between results, but between courage. Your consistency highlights the ideas they never acted on. Your momentum exposes fear they learned to live with. And that's why jealousy shows up before results, before proof, before validation, before anything is even finalized. It shows up early because power is felt before it's proven. And that's why it sounds like, are you sure that'll work? Why would you do it that way? That sounds risky. That's not concern, by the way. That's discomfort with your rising authority. People think jealousy comes from losing. It doesn't. It comes from anticipation. Because power is felt before it's proven. The moment someone realizes if she keeps going, the dynamic will change. Their nervous system reacts. You know that moment when you're telling someone about something new you're doing and you watch their face shift. That micro pause before they respond. That's not them processing your words. That's them recalculating where you fit. And when they say something like, wow, that's ambitious, and you feel your chest deflate just a little, you start adding context, softening the edges, making it smaller so they can digest it. You've been calling that reading the room. But what it actually is you managing their discomfort with your repositioning. And jealousy doesn't only come from people close to you. It comes from observers, quiet watchers, people who sense possibility and feel threatened by it. When you move outside the norm, you don't just inspire people. You destabilize the hierarchy they were comfortable in. You remind them that rules are optional, that comfort is a choice, that staying stuck was never fate. And that realization is unsettling. Jealousy doesn't always look like hate. Sometimes it looks like discouragement dressed as logic. They say things like, just be realistic. Don't get your hopes up. Everybody can't win. Here's what you need to understand. You've been interpreting these statements as care, as protection. But let me reframe it. When someone says be realistic, what they're really saying is stay in a reality I can predict. When they say don't get your hopes up, they're saying your hope makes me uncomfortable with my resignation. You thought you were being too sensitive. What you were actually doing was detecting power negotiation. That's how power gets policed. When people can't control your direction, they try to control your confidence. When they can't match your courage, they attempt to limit your belief. It's like someone dimming the lights, not because you're shining too bright, but because your glow exposes what they've been avoiding. And if you're not careful, their doubt starts sounding like your own. That's why distance becomes necessary. Here's what most women don't realize until it clicks. You've been treating their discomfort as evidence you need to slow down. But their discomfort is actually evidence you're repositioning correctly. And here's the part that changes everything. Their jealousy only works because you keep feeding it. Every time you explain your vision to someone who already decided not to understand it, every time you justify your choices to someone who benefits from you staying stuck, every time you slow your momentum so someone else can feel settled, you're not being considerate. You're maintaining the dynamic that keeps you accessible. You thought their comfort was your responsibility, but what you're starting to see now is this. Your explanation was the resource they needed. Your hesitation was the opening they exploited. Your accommodation was the leverage that kept you positioned below them. You weren't powerless. You were holding the system in place. And the moment you stop, the system collapses. So ask yourself this. If your power didn't matter, why would it make anyone uncomfortable? Here's how jealousy actually loses power. Not by confronting it, not by defending yourself, not by explaining your vision, but by removing access. And removing access looks like this. Someone says, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Old response, "Well, I've been thinking about it and here's why." New response, "Yeah, I'm sure." And you let that silence sit. Someone says, "That sounds risky." Old response, "I know, but I've done the research." New response, "It might be," and you don't perform certainty for them. Someone says, "Just be realistic." Old response, "I am being realistic. Let me explain." New response, "I hear you," and you proceed anyway. You're not being cold. You're just no longer treating their comfort as clearance. You need to move. Jealousy survives on reaction. And every time you reassure, clarify, or dim your momentum, you keep feeding it. But the moment you stop feeding it commentary, the loop collapses. Because jealousy can't operate without your participation. You don't neutralize it by convincing people you're right. You neutralize it by proceeding anyway. That's how power stays yours. Think back to a moment when somebody questioned your decision and you felt that drop in your stomach. That moment when you started second guessing yourself. You've been calling that self-awareness or openness to feedback. But what it actually was you accepting their framing of your reality over your own. Jealousy isn't an emotion. It's a response to displacement. It shows up when someone realizes they no longer have the same positioning with you. Not because you attacked them, not because you announced anything, but because your movement changed the math. Jealousy is what happens when access expires and control dissolves. That's why it shows up early. That's why it feels unprovoked. And that's why it has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with your courage. People don't react to irrelevance. They react to shifted power. And now that you can name it, you don't have to observe it anymore. Now you have a choice. You can keep treating their discomfort as evidence you're doing something wrong, or you can start treating it as evidence you're repositioning correctly. You can keep operating from the old system where their approval determines your direction, where their comfort dictates your pace, where their understanding is required for you to proceed. Or you can operate from the new one, where their reaction is data, not direction, where their discomfort confirms your movement, not your mistake, where you decide what you're building and they decide how they respond. One choice keeps you in the hierarchy, the other builds yours. Jealousy doesn't get resolved, it gets outgrown. And the moment you stop explaining your movement, the power dynamic resets. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. This channel isn't about reacting. It's about recognizing when your power shifts and refusing to hand it back. And if you're learning how to keep moving, even when people try to shake your confidence to steady themselves, subscribe. This is where we stand in our power unapologetically.